To discuss all that and more, we're joined by USA Today Washington Bureau Chief Susan Page, Washington Post columnist David Ignatius, Associated Press White House correspondent Julie Pace, and CBS News contributor and Washington Post congressional reporter Ed O'Keefe. Julie, I want to start with you. There's a lot going on. Where are things at the end of James Comey's testimony and the president's response in this story?
Well, I think we're at a point right now where Comey's testimony did open up new lines of inquiry for the congressional investigators. Certainly, I think it points toward Mueller looking at obstruction of justice as this investigation expands. From the perspective of the White House, they do have some things from the testimony to latch onto. Certainly the fact that Comey came out and said, yes, I did tell the president 3 times that he was not personally under investigation. You are going to hear that over and over and over again from this White House. I think, though, that the White House is coming to grips with the fact that even though Comey's testimony is behind them, this is a cloud that is going to hang over this White House for a long time. This is not going away. And when I say that, I mean that staffers in the White House have a grasp of that. I'm not quite sure the president fully understands that this is something that is going to be part of his presidency for a very long time.
That's right, David. So this question of whether the president is being investigated, as Julie said, they really held on to that. But that was when James Comey was FBI director that he said that. So where do you think things stand now in terms of the president being investigated and what he has to worry about?
Well, we don't know, and I think that's the point, is this now is in the hands of Robert Mueller, very experienced, very tough prosecutor, and he will explore these leads. I thought, as Julie said, that this was not a decisive moment in this story. Lindsey Graham earlier said it was a wrestling match. It certainly was a match in which there was no knockout punch. Each side had its strong points. The picture of President Trump that was presented by James Comey, even Senator Langford said, was very inappropriate behavior. The kind of behavior, it's just hard to imagine a president saying those things to his FBI director about ongoing investigations, but not a knockout punch. I think everybody needs to hunker down now for a long process. Just a final takeaway. Watching the reactions from Republicans in the Senate, I think it's going to be very hard to pursue this obstruction of justice theme as long as there's a Republican Congress. So next year's midterm elections, I think, in some ways are going to be a referendum on what we heard this week.
That's right, Susan. David makes the right point, which is this is a political court. This isn't about whether the president can be prosecuted in a court of law. And so those initial reactions, while people might not have joined in the White House's complaints about James Comey, there was nobody saying, well, either the president's really in trouble. And so isn't that the best news for him of all, that Republicans aren't talking about impeachment or still seem to be behind him?
I guess I wouldn't see it in that sunny way, because while of course it's true that this week did not settle what's going to happen in this investigation, what it did make clear was there are multiple strands of investigations, not just Russian collusion, but obstruction of justice, that it touches the president's son-in-law, his top aides, his attorney general, that these investigations are going to continue, be a cloud, sap his ability to get other things done, and that while Republicans didn't break with him, remember, it was just last month that Comey was fired as FBI director. This investigation and this controversy is moving very, very quickly. You compare it to Watergate. I mean, think about the months and months and months that proceeded with Watergate before you got even near the point we are now, where the president says 100% I'll testify under oath. That is extraordinary. I think that Donald Trump has been so unprecedented in so many ways in office and as a candidate that we risk losing sight how historic this procession of events is going to be and how much it is likely to define his presidency.
And Ed, as Susan points out, there's, and Senator Langford said the president's obstruction question is still being investigated by the Senate committee. In testimony, James Comey said that he was sure that that's what the special counsel would be investigating. So while the president is focusing on Comey telling him he's not being investigated, he seems to be facing a lot of this now. What's the reaction up on the Hill that was not being said publicly?
I think there's just this understanding, as Lindsey Graham so presciently described it, that he's just self-inflicting himself with these wounds. And the more he stays quiet and just allows the legal process and the committee process to play out at this point, the better for him, and the more focused the White House can remain on the policy that Congress is trying to enact. It's important to remind folks at home, despite what you might see on TV and read in the papers, there was big work this week on rolling back financial regulatory reforms of the Obama era. Republicans are struggling to come up with a health care plan and may not be able to do it. And as Senator Graham alluded to, there is significant bipartisan work underway right now to get a sanctions bill passed that not only punishes Russia, but also Iran. Originally, it was just going to punish Iran, and the Democrats and some Republicans insisted on adding Russia. And the Senate now realizes they've got a real chance here for some significant bipartisan work. But all that gets clouded by what will happen Tuesday when the Attorney General testifies to the Intelligence Committee. And I think equally dramatically, his deputy goes and talks to Appropriations Subcommittee to explain himself as well. Every week, there's probably going to be something like this, some public forum where it gets raised again and attention is put on it. Committee rooms and closed-door meetings will be the centers of the drama on the Hill in the next few weeks.
His deputy, Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
Susan, let me ask you a question on the Rosenstein question here, because James Comey testified. One of the most striking lines from him was that he said that the administration line that the FBI was, that morale was bad and that he had somehow been a bad leader, he said was just an absolute lie. Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, in his letter to the President explaining why Comey had not done his job well, talked about those things. He said the credibility of the FBI had suffered damage, that the public trust about the FBI had suffered damage. So James Comey, when he said there was lying, wasn't just talking about the President. He was talking about the Deputy Attorney General.
That's right. Although it's certainly clear that there were a lot of questions raised about Comey's behavior as FBI director. He doesn't come to this with a reputation that is unsullied, especially when it comes to his handling of the Hillary Clinton investigation and his public comments about that. That said, his standing within the FBI, with FBI staffers, with the agents with whom he works, seems to have been very strong. So this may be a case where Rod Rosenstein is correct in saying there was some erosion of public confidence in the FBI by Democrats. And also, when Comey says that it is I think he said a lie, pure and simple, that he was leading an agency that somehow been crippled because of his leadership.
Another challenge for James Comey, David, is the fact that he leaked his own memos through a friend to the papers. Have we seen a bank shot like that before? And what do you make of a bank shot like that? It's
it shows you that James Comey plays hardball. His decision after he had been fired to take this information and use what intelligence is known as a cutout, give it to a lawyer who'll give it to the press, shows that he was going to put pressure, turn the screws for the appointment of a special counsel, and he got what he wanted. I don't think there's anything illegal in what he did, but I think it undermined his credibility if he's going to be a witness in this he said drama going forward. It probably hurt him a little bit. Everybody's playing hardball now. The president is. The president has hired one of the toughest, roughest, toughest lawyers around to argue his case in Mark Krasowitz. And so we're going to the memo to the country, hunker down. Yeah. This is just beginning, and it's going to be a tough fight.
But not illegal to leak it. In fact, not unusual. And in fact, when I read that remarkable story in the New York Times, I thought, oh, Comey gave somebody his memo to leak. In fact, I thought possibly Comey leaked it himself as somebody close to Comey. That is something I suspect all of us at this table have done.
And I think important for readers and viewers to draw a distinction between leaks of classified information, which is something that the administration has been hammering, which is illegal, and political leaks, essentially, which is what Washington really thrives on. I mean, what Comey did was pull back the curtain on something that is a fairly regular process in this town. It's not clean, it doesn't look pretty, but it's what happens day to day.
But that process is what Donald Trump has been running against. And he has a lot of people out there who share his view that there's something wrong with it. We journalists don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's part of how information, but there are a lot of people in the country who don't like it. And
but
so
no clean hands at the White House on leaking either.
Understood. I'm just saying, again, we're heading into a messy season in which the charges are going to go back and forth, and there are so many people in the country who look at Washington, Washington were describing and don't like it.
That's right. And this is a battle for public opinion. And so because if anything's going to happen to the president, it's going to have to happen in Congress. So people who don't like it, even if it doesn't fit the technical definition of something to be prosecuted, they don't like it. Seems unseemly.
Yeah, and I thought it was fascinating how quickly everyone in Trump's orbit seized on the idea that he's a leaker. There is nothing inherently illegal about somebody sharing information with a reporter or leaking it unless it's classified. And it looks like there may be an FBI policy that he violated by taking his work product home and then sharing it with a reporter. But regardless, it wasn't classified information. This is how Washington works, at least the old way. And I thought that was one of the most brilliant moments of the whole thing, because it was really transparently describing to people at home, literally, this is how this works. You see it in the paper. This is what I did to make that happen. And I think the other important thing here is he put into the public record now months of reports about how the president behaves as a boss. You wrote about this for The Atlantic, that this was an HR document, essentially, and he was confirming a lot of what we heard about the way the president works. And the idea that people are fearful of confronting him in the moment about this stuff, that for whatever reason, he's intimidating or he, somehow exudes something that stops people from telling him, sir, that's not a good idea.
We're going to take just a break here. Susan, I'll tee you up when we come back on the other side. Everybody sit tight. We'll be right back. And we're back with more from our politics panel. Susan, you were going to say something before we left.
I was going to say one of the big disclosures in the Comey testimony was that he in effect leaked this document to the New York Times. And it struck me that this is exactly what happens when you have an investigation, and especially when you have people testifying under oath. Senator Collins asked him the question that got that answer, not even realizing, to her surprise, that he would turn out to be the leaker. And it's turned out to be perhaps the most damaging single thing for his part that he said during this hearing. This would show the risk, for instance, of Donald Trump's 100% guarantee that he is willing to testify under oath about this whole affair.
Julie, you think he's going to testify, the president?
I think if the president's lawyers have anything to say about it, then he might not. But the president is someone who kind of throws these things out there on the table, and then we watch his staff and presumably his lawyers in this case start to walk it back.
Well, and we're going to step back and look at all the other things that happened this week. But Ed, do you think, everybody on the Hill wants him to testify? I don't think that's going to happen, do you?
Not to the Senate, I don't think. I think more likely he ends up talking to Robert Mueller. I can't imagine a forum in which he would come and talk to the Senate as Senator Schumer offered. It's nice of him to ask, but I don't think that's the way it would happen.
Before we move on to the rest of the world, David, Attorney General Lynch from the Obama administration, also not some good news for her out of the Comey testimony. This idea that basically she told Comey to refer to the investigation into Hillary Clinton as a matter as opposed to an investigation.
Yes, she seemed to be trying to trim this for the political benefit of Secretary Clinton, and I think that harmed her reputation. And Comey was very firm in saying this was a criminal investigation. It wasn't a matter. He pushed back pretty hard on that. So I think she will be called, as Senator Graham said, and that will be she'll get grilled.
Sessions will be appearing next week. Susan, what do you think of the Attorney General? What do you think about what does next week hold for him?
And Senator Langford said in the interview that you just did that it's his assumption that will be in public. We all hope that'll be the case, because there is nothing more interesting than watching these hearings. It's important because, for one thing, we have the question about what was it that prompted James Comey, while he was FBI director, to conclude well before the fact that Sessions was going to have to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. We have some source stories on that, but it would be interesting to hear what's going on. And also the question about why, after recusing himself, he felt free to participate in the firing of James Comey as FBI director. Those are both big questions.
David, I want to ask you a question about this international dust-up here. You've got the president praising the Arab nations that have cut ties with Qatar, and his Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense backing up Qatar because that's where the U.S. has a military base. How do we sort through all that?
I think this is a real disagreement about policy. I think the Secretary of State Tillerson, Secretary of Defense Mattis are both concerned about the status of the biggest U.S. base in the Gulf, Al Udeid Air Base, in Qatar. They think it's crucial for the fight against ISIS, and they want to see a mediated settlement of this dispute between Qatar and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, principally other Gulf states. The president doesn't look at it that way, and he thinks this is an opportunity to push back against extremism that Qatar arguably supports. Qatar's closer to Iran than most of the Gulf states. And interestingly, I'm told the president is backed by H.R. McMaster, his national security advisor, and probably also by Mike Pompeo, CIA director. So there's a real difference of opinion. This morning, Tillerson spoke, I'm told, with the Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The Foreign Minister of the UAE is coming to see Tillerson on Wednesday. So this is really rolling, and we're seeing a real disagreement.
And Julie, this disagreement, you mentioned the president kind of throws things out there. This came kind of in that fashion. He also said that his Department of Justice was pushing a watered-down travel ban, an expression they were trying not to use because it had hurt him legally. He also picked a fight with the London mayor after the terrorist attacks there. These don't seem to be in his interest, these actions, all of them.
They don't. And it goes to show that even within the administration, no one is safe. The president is willing to call out his own Justice Department. He's willing to publicly disagree with his Secretary of State. This dispute on Qatar happened very publicly. Secretary Tillerson was sitting in the front row of the news conference where the president got up and essentially said, I'm siding with the Saudis on this. I think this is a good thing that's happening here. But again, we have to get over this idea that the president is taking advice, I think, from people in his administration. He is his own man. When he believes in an issue, whether it's going to politically backfire on him or not, if he believes that, he's going to go out there, often on Twitter.
What do you think, Ed, is going to happen with health care in the Senate?
They're going to keep talking this week. The goal is to get something done by the August recess, and there is talk of possibly keeping Congress around a little longer in order to get it done. They need to get this out of the way because tax reform is really the one that they really want to get done at this point. I think what they've realized is it's just too difficult to get 52 people with all of their ideological and geographic differences to agree on something.
What do you think?
I'm not counting against Mitch McConnell. And you know who, this whole furor about Russia and the hearings we had this week, a big gift to Mitch McConnell because it enabled him to make progress legislatively on the health care issue without anybody noticing because we were all paying such, he invoked Senate Rule number 14, which is every Kansas schoolgirl knows, is the rule that enables you to bypass committee hearings. So he can just bring this to the floor and have the kind of vote without the kind of full debate that you would expect.
But it will be far less ambitious than the House bill. Remember that.
David, we can't go without you helping us out. What's happening in Great Britain right now?
Well, what's happening is part of the political reordering that's taking place all over the world. In simple terms, it turns out that Theresa May is a worse campaigner than we knew. It turns out that Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour candidate, is a better campaigner. And I'm hearing from some of my British contacts, maybe in this vote, there was a little bit of anti-Brexit sentiment. People thinking, you know, this is a way to say, we're not so happy about leaving Europe.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you. We'll be right back. Stay with us.